Welcome to the Build Your Beautiful Business podcast with your host, Julie C. Butler. If you're looking to build the business of your dreams, then this is the space you want to be in. Join Julie as she talks about ways that you can successfully scale your profitable dream business, one that will give you ultimate time freedom and the abundant lifestyle you deserve. Julie will take you by the hand, sharing with you her business savvy strategies as she chats it up with her favorite online entrepreneurs. You'll get a weekly dose of boosted confidence as you learn as they reveal their insight, tips, and tools that you need to start building a profitable dream business of your own, one that you'll love and that works for you on autopilot.
Hi there. Welcome back to another episode of the BBB podcast. Today, I'm excited. I have my beautiful friend, Nicole Elliott, on with me. Welcome to the show, Nicole.
Thanks so much for having me on, Julie.
I know, and this is not the first time we speak. So you've been part of my summit, and I feel like we spoke more than once.
Yeah, I think we had a chat before the summit. Then I came on the summit. Maybe there was another conversation in there. I'm not sure. I get your emails, so I feel like I know what's happening in your life in Costa Rica and scorpions and stuff.
Yeah, I know. I feel like I know you too. Maybe it wasn't like the live expert panels of summits and stuff like that that we were. Either my summit or another summit. Okay, it's hard to keep track of all the things, right?
Honestly, though. Yes.
Yeah. And today I'm excited because we're going to talk about something that's important in our business, and that is copy. Mm-hmm. And when I say copy, I mean like the words that we use on our websites and the places. So copy is one of those things that can, I don't know, Nicole, do you think it can make or break your business?
I mean, I'm a little bit biased, but honestly, yes. I mean, obviously, you also need a really, really strong offer. You need to have a good audience fit. Those things should actually come before you write up really killer copy. But yeah, I mean, as a business owner, you have copy everywhere on your website, your email campaigns, on your sales pages, even like your podcast show notes, getting people to listen in, inviting people to join your newsletter, hosting summits. There's a lot of copy there. Like it's everywhere. And most business owners are a little bit annoyed that it's everywhere, but it's good for me at the end of the day. So
I know. I love it. Okay, so before we dive into talking about all the things copy, maybe some things that some controversies.
Excellent.
Nicole, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm Nicole, of course. I am a conversion copywriter and messaging strategist who specializes in human-sounding, non-salesy sales copy, primarily for websites, but I also do a lot of email campaigns, sales pages, brand messaging strategy guides, case studies. It really kind of runs the gambit. I actually got my start writing professionally in academia, but I very quickly got sick of kind of that dry, stuffy, drained of all approach to writing. I then became an ESL, English as Second Language teacher for a while, burned out a bit on that, then found copywriting, realized it was going to give me the chance to actually write like a human, and really haven't looked back since then. And that was about 8 years ago, which is still, my brain just cannot compute every time I realize that.
It's amazing. I love it. I love like also hearing the story about how people get to where they are. It's kind of cool, to see how, our journey unfolds, and it, it also, it can do that even though, like, even when you're in business, it can still do that, right? Like sometimes you get thrown into something else and you start with, doing like for me, for example, like photography. And then, you kind of veer. And then I had a stock photo membership, but then I decided like, no, I want to teach, so it's really cool and interesting to see how people's stories go. So
yeah, so many business owners I find as well just kind of like fell into what they were doing. Like I didn't even know, this is so embarrassing, but I didn't even know that copywriting existed for like a long time until I started Googling ways to make a living writing professionally. And then I'm like, oh, copywriting, I like the sound of this. So yeah, like you said, business shifts as you go along the way. My business now, the types of things I focus on now are very different from just a few years ago. So yeah, it's quite the journey, to say the least.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's dive in because we could talk about copy all day. But let's start with this. So, okay, so the first thing I have for you is, okay, so it sounds like you you had some common copy mistakes you wanted to cover for us today. So could you walk me through some of those? So let's start with that, because I think that that's important. Like if you dive into it and you're like, okay, here are the things not to do.
Yes, yeah, it's always a good place to start. So I'm going to start with probably just like the most common one I see, like no matter the industry, no matter the size of the business, even really big businesses I see doing this. And that mistake is just using too much, quote, me copy. So when I say me copy, I mean copy that is really, really focused on the company. It's written from the perspective of the company. It's a lot of, I, my, we, our, things like I help XYZ, our passion is ABC, what have you. And while obviously there's going to be places where you need these things in your copy, like there's always going to be places where you actually do have to talk about your brand, who you are, what you do, of course. A lot of businesses tend to forget that they also need to be talking to the audience. So one thing I would maybe challenge listeners to do is just, take your website, take a sales page you have, give it a bit of the audit. Start by going through and circling any place you're seeing this me language. So again, I, me, our, we, and then see if there's a way you can give it a bit of a swap. So it is using you language, or language that's talking to the audience. And so in general, obviously it's more interesting for the readers when they are going through that. It's a lot less boring. Often if you have a lot of that me copy, like people just zone out, it's not particularly interesting. And it's just things that your audience can resonate with more. So for example, let's say, Julie, you talk about building a beautiful business. Rather than leading on your website with something like, I help women entrepreneurs build beautiful businesses, see how you can switch that so you're talking directly to the audience. So you don't necessarily, sometimes you're actually going to write you in that, but sometimes it can be implied. So maybe you just lead with the verb. So build your beautiful business with, whatever type of service you have.
I love that. I love that. And it can make all the difference in the world. And it's funny because it's funny that we're having this conversation right now. We're recording this today because I'm actually working on my funnel, a low ticket offer funnel. And I'm right now, like I actually almost forgot to, our interview. I was right spank in the copy. And it's funny, like it's so well timed because I think I can take these tips and now I can go and make sure that, I'm speaking the language of, more, you can achieve this by, buying this or whatever. Right. So I find that it's just perfect timing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's something that can be really easy to forget because again, like it's your business. Like you're so entrenched. Is that the word I'm looking for? Yeah, I think that's the right word.
Yes,
entrenched.
I think so.
You'll go with it. We'll go with it. That you're just, you think you're viewing your business through a different lens than your readers. And I think one thing I do want to mention about that particular tip, like I said, there's going to be places where you talk about who you are, what your actual business is, things like your process, like you're going to have that quote me language. But the important thing is to make sure you're then sharing that in the context of what that means for your readers. So really like peeling back that onion is how I always think of it to answer that so what question. So if I think of an example, I talk a lot about, I have a specific process called the 3-step human first messaging approach. And so instead of on my website, I don't just say, I have this approach and we'll use it. I'll say, when we work together, we'll do this through the help of my 3-step human first messaging approach. So you can walk away. I don't remember exactly what I say, but so you can walk away with copy that captures your voice and feels like you, as well as resonates with your audience. So I'm just, using the me copy, but also peeling back the layer and saying how that's relevant to the audience.
Yeah, I think that the one thing we forget though to do also is putting ourselves in their shoes when we're writing the copy too. And I'm not sure if I'm going off topic now, but that came to mind when you were talking, and it's so important. And I know this because we're invested in our own stuff, right? And we know what it is, and we know how it can help our readers or our people, our potential client, and all that stuff. But sometimes the way we say it, I kind of think that we can miss information and we can miss, right? And that happened to me. Like I had an offer that I've had for a few years now, and I had it on my website. and I was selling it a lot as a bump offer. And it was just like a little chapter. And I must have wrote it good because it was selling. But when I looked at the copy of the sales page and I had my coach revisit my copy that as I wrote like probably 2 years ago, she's like, well, Julie, like you're missing this and you're missing that. And I'm like, I wouldn't have seen that because it's kind of like you've seen it so much, you wrote it, and it's like you don't see what's missing when it's your own. So I find that having a copywriter in your pocket can help in that way too,
Yeah. Well, yeah, that actually brings me to another mistake that fits in quite nicely, which was actually, I literally have it written in front of me, not thinking like your ideal audience, which is exactly what you said. So you nailed it. And a part of that is not doing the appropriate audience research. So like you said, I think it's very easy. I mean, even I do this, myself, for us to make assumptions about, our audience's pain points and, what might be preventing them from working with us and what types of things they're going to want to see on the page. And while it's definitely a good thought exercise to make sure we're just sitting down and saying, okay, when someone first lands on my page, what's going through their head? Are they saying, what the heck is this? Are they experiencing really strong pain points? Are they very skeptical because they've already worked with, a similar service like yours in the past and they've been burned? We have to have that understanding. But rather than just making an assumption about what that is, one of the best things you can do is just sit down and talk to your audience. So whether that's you're running surveys, or whether you're conducting interviews. I'm a huge fan of interviews. Actually, I think you had a really, really great podcast episode with another copywriter who focuses a lot on messaging and interviews. So I think I need to send her a message because we have a lot in common in our approach. I think it was Nadine. So if anyone's interested in learning more about gathering audience insights to inform your messaging, definitely go listen to that episode. It's a really, really good one. But it's really, really important. So that way you're understanding, you're not only using the right language, you can use the actual language from these interviews, when you're talking directly to the pain points, like, hey, do you feel like XYZ? Then you're not just quote guessing. But you're also making sure it's not just that you're getting the right words, but you can make sure that you're focusing on the right things. So for example, maybe your audience has tried a whole bunch of different alternative solutions in the past that you didn't know that they had tried. And so then you can, by interviewing them, you can find that out and you can address that on the page. Like, hey, maybe you've tried X and this was the problem with that. Maybe you've tried Y, that was the problem with that. And then you can connect that into like, hey, here's my solution. Here's why it's not going to have any of those same problems. About assuming, obviously you don't need to do that for every offer, every type of solution and audience. But if you have an audience that's uniquely skeptical, while also who has done quite a bit of opting into other services and such in your industry, it can be really helpful to have that awareness for sure.
Yeah. And you know what? You're right. That episode with Nadine was really good. So I'll throw it in the show notes. So if anybody wants to have a listen to another talk about copywriting, but like completely different than what we're talking about, that's definitely a good one to listen to. Okay, cool. So excuse me, do you have any other mistakes, Nicole?
I do. This one, people don't always like this one, but it is true. And another common mistake I see is, quote, getting lazy in your headlines and subheads. So, let's say you have spots throughout your website, your sales page, what have you, where you just say facts or what you get or testimonials or about or our process. And that's the headline. Or also another common one. You don't see it so much anymore, but where people have like a welcome to my website. That used to be really common, like back in the day when blogs were really kicking off. And while these are, they're fine. They're telling readers what they're about to read, but that's essentially all that they do. They're not really encouraging people to start digging into that body copy to see what's an offer. And the reality is a lot of people, I guess we'll talk a little bit about the differences between short versus long copy later, because that's a fun one. But you're not going to have people who are reading everything. You're going to have some people who are just kind of skimmers. They're not going to stop unless something really grabs their attention, which means that the most interesting features, benefits, outcomes, what have you, of your service are getting buried in the body copy. And so let's say, for example, rather than, let's say at the end of your sales page, you have a facts section. Rather than just writing facts as the headline, actually answer the top hesitation that people are having. So I saw a really good one on, I think, one of Amy Porterfield's courses. If you ever want inspiration for copy, like I obsessively save every single sales page I've seen from her ever. I think a major hesitation for people, it was for like her list building course, was that you already had to, like you had to have a lead magnet or you had to already have some type of established list. But to join the course, you didn't. And so the headline was actually like, it was a quote. And it said, no, you don't already have to have a thriving email list to succeed in this course, plus answers to other frequently asked questions. So even if you're having someone who is, going to be a skimmer, maybe they're not going to actively open up all of the facts, but they're still going to see that. They're still going to have that hesitation addressed just by skimming through the subheads. And so, for example, to give another idea, if you have a section where you're talking about all the different features, rather than just saying what you get, you can say something like everything you need to whatever the outcome is, and then have your list of features. Or for testimonials, rather than just saying testimonials or what people say, actually pull out some of those results or pull out one of the most engaging testimonials and just, put that in quotes and put that in the headline. Like I think on my homepage, where I share a few different testimonials, I think there's a section where I just share like screenshots of 2 different emails from people. And I write something like, from double the consultations to copy they wish they wrote themselves. So even because people aren't necessarily going to stop and read, all the individual small text in the testimonials, but even someone skimming is going to see that headline. And so I think it's, this is really important because when you're on, well, for a few different reasons, but when you're writing copy, you need to make sure you're writing for different types of decision makers. So you're going to have some of those people who are those fast action takers, which is not me. I'll admit it, but you're going to have the people who are just going to read, the big parts, the bolded areas, the underlined sections, the headlines, the subheads, and make their decisions strictly off of that. So you need to make those parts really, really compelling and make sure your most interesting parts aren't getting buried. And of course, you're also going to have people like me who like to read all of the information before they make a decision. But then you also need to have strong body copy because obviously they're not going to read all the information if it's not interesting and engaging and all of that. But so you just want to make sure you're writing for both of those and making sure your headlines are kind of pulling their weight, if you will.
Yeah, I think it's important to write for the different types of people because I can be either or. I can be like, I'm going to read the sales page from A to Z, every single word that's on there. But if the transformation is strong and it's exactly what I need, like I did that like a few months ago. I was like, I didn't even read the sales page. I was like, she did such a good job at pinpointing the pain point that I was like, I'm in. Like I didn't even need to read the sales page. I hit, buy so fast that, do you know what I mean? So, but it's important to write for those 2 types of people because, or 3 or however, because I'm both. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
Like sometimes I want to read line by line because I'm like, and then, it's not even uncommon for me to like hit buy now because I'm like, okay, I know I want this, but then go back after and read everything. So
to get even more excited for the future purchase.
Yes. Yeah.
I get it.
But yeah, you're right. Like we have to, write for all types. It does with some good tips on how we can, write that tagline and stuff like that. Like that was some really good, advice. And I think that if you're listening to this, it wouldn't be a bad idea to go check out Nicole's website and see how she's done it. Right.
Thank you.
And then we never copy because we don't do that, but it can be good inspiration. And who knows, maybe Nicole's your person and she'll be your next or your future copywriter.
I mean, they know where to find me now. So
yeah, they do. Okay. Any other mistakes or was that?
I mean, there's so many, but maybe let's dig into some controversies. Spice things up a bit.
That's a good start. I think that's a good start. And I think that to get us writing in the right direction, I think that was good. Yeah. Okay. You talked a little bit about it, but let's talk about short versus long copy. Yeah. Let's talk about that because, we hear it and it's so difficult sometimes to, you go online and you hear so many different variations of like people
Mhm.
talking about the different things. And so one person will say like, no, long copy is, dead and it's short copy now, or vice versa. So what's the deal?
Yeah. Well, moral of the story is I will believe that long copy is dead when I see numbers that are backing it up. And I haven't seen that yet. But I think you raise a good point because I think especially, in the age of the internet and people are always talking about how, the internet has destroyed our attention spans and all that. So a lot of people have this impression that copy has to be short or very, very short in order to perform well. And I'm sure there's plenty of examples out there where the copy actually would benefit from being shortened or, kind of had some of the fat trimmed, if you will, a bit. But if you are, kind of following some of the recommendations I gave above, if you're using that you language, if you are, I guess we didn't get the chance to talk about all these different things, but if you're including a lot of proof to back up what you're saying, if you're answering that so what question, if you're offering up some specific examples, especially if those specific examples are coming from like those interviews you've conducted, so you're using, real world examples that your audience actually has been through. If you're including benefits and you're, putting in all of these things, and you find that your copy does get a little bit on the long side, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't necessarily mean you're doing things wrong. I think that long copy that is specific to your audience, that is tangible, very clear in those benefits and not just kind of like vague, wishy-washy, the pseudo-inspirational copy that you see a lot in particularly the coaching world. And coaches, I love you, I work with a lot of you, but I see a lot of this type of copy. So if it's, specific, engaging, or specific, tangible, and engaging, this type of copy does still sell. There's a reason why people are continuing to use it. And whereas if you cut back too much, and this is actually something I see a lot with people in the marketing world. And again, like coaches, I also love marketers. I'm a close partner with all sorts of different types of marketers. But it's a really common habit they do of just kind of want to peel back everything because they also are, they want to make sure they appeal to everyone and they're hesitant to get too specific and what have you. But if you do this, you really run the risk of giving your readers, your audience, of not giving your readers and your audience enough information to understand why you're different, to understand why they should make the decision now to work with you, and to really counter all of those hesitations they might have that are preventing them from feeling confident from taking those next steps with you. So I think, there's not necessarily like a hard and fast rule about how long the copy should be, but I think we should definitely be conscious. Obviously, don't write more than you need to. If there's a shorter way to say something, say it. Although occasionally, if you can add a bit more personality and it gets longer, I'm not going to necessarily say that's the wrong thing to do. But it doesn't need to be, you don't need to strip everything out. And long copy, as long as it becomes almost a bit of like a design issue as well, when we're talking about writing for the different types of audiences. So if you do, have to include more of this information in to make sure you're overcoming all the hesitations. Like, for example, if you have a facts section, you can have it. So the answers to the facts aren't necessarily on the page, but people click the question to get more information. So the information's accessible, but the whole copy isn't reading so long. And so that's kind of my little soapbox about that.
Would you say like maybe a higher ticket course or program or something, you can go for the longer copy sales page versus something that's more of a smaller, like $37 or $500 course? Maybe you don't need to go super extensive on the sales page. Would you say that you can also use that kind of like as a guide?
Yeah, I think you definitely can. Like it's definitely about the price, but also about, it comes back to knowing your audience. How much of an investment, maybe for some people, a $5,000 coaching program is a lot. For me, for example, for a lot of people, it's not, depending on how far along they are in business. So if they, if it's kind of an easy sell, quote, I use easy loosely, or not a huge investment, obviously you can get away with less copy. But the more education that you're going to need in it, maybe the more, I've mentioned a little bit about like skeptical audiences in the past, if they've been burned, that's going to need a little bit longer copy so you can overcome, all of those specific hesitations they might have. If someone is quite new to solutions like yours or didn't know that you had your type of solution exists, you're going to have to do more education about copy there. especially, maybe they haven't even realized they have a problem yet, which is actually the absolute hardest audience to kind of win over. And that requires a lot of copy as well. So really just, yeah, it comes down to knowing the audience. And I wish I could remember where I read this. I think it was from Joanna Weave, who is one of my favorite copywriters. She's kind of like the original conversion copywriter, if you will. And she described it as like, sorry, let me see if I can get this right. Depending on how many coffees you would have to go through to convince a person to opt into your service, that's how many, like the longer the page it is. So for example, if you need to go through 3 coffees to convince them to join your coaching program, okay, maybe that's a 3,000 word page or something. Like, she had a specific number and I don't remember, but you just think about how long, if you were talking to someone one-on-one, how many different elements you'd have to walk through, how many different questions you'd have to answer, and kind of adjust based on that. Because you also sometimes have people, if your audience is, for example, really, really busy executives, maybe they already know that they want to invest in a coaching program. They're just at the point where they just need to pick out which one. So you don't necessarily have to dedicate all the time to talking to those pain points and stuff. Maybe you're just jumping straight to differentiators and like features, benefits. So it's just about knowing, maybe you're just going to trip them up, or you're going to hold them back from taking action if you're adding too much on the page. So a lot of considerations, moral of the story.
Yeah. And I think too, and I'm going to throw this out there, but I think it's a lot of things now have to do with what feels right for you. Right. And that's important too, because it keeps you authentic. It keeps you like, yes, okay, there's rules to follow when it comes to selling things, right? Like, and how you want to sell and market that offer or that program or whatever it is. So keeping in mind what you talked about, but also what feels right for you, like if you've got like a $47 product and having like, 4 boxes explaining what that 30, but if you do a really good job at explaining it, and that page feels right, then go for it. And all we can do is test out our pages.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You're unlikely to get it perfectly right the first time. So it's absolutely a test. Test the shorter page, test the longer page. Yeah, totally nailed it there.
Yeah. I love it. I think that was good. I think that was really good. Like tips and tricks and everything. Okay. So, all right, let's talk about DIY. Let's talk about, okay. So when is the right time for people to DIY versus hire a copywriter? And I know that, like when we talk about these things, I know that, these answers are subjective. So, but truly there is a time in your business where it's a good time to hire a copywriter. I think that in every single one of our businesses, unless you are already good with copywriter, which some people are.
It's true. Yeah. But it's definitely not like a natural skill. I think if you consider the way we learn writing in school and what have you, it's very, very different from writing copy online to sell things in business. But usually what I tell people, and sometimes this is shooting myself in the foot, but I usually say that it's not the best, investing in copywriting is not the best use of your money if you're not fully clear on your offers or your audience. If you're still kind of testing the waters or experimenting, in that case, anything you invest today is just, you're going to end up changing it down the line. And the copywriter is usually not going to have the clarity they need to write really effective copy. We're talking about like knowing your audience and conducting those interviews. That's just not possible at this stage. So what I usually recommend, if you're at this particular stage, is to give it a shot yourself, which I know can be a little bit painful. Find a template, work with a lower level content writer just to kind of get something up. And then perhaps consider getting an audit from a professional copywriter. So that way you're getting some specific actionable recommendations for how you can improve the copy you've written. But you're spending maybe $500-ish on an audit versus thousands of dollars for a full done for you copy project. On the other hand, if you are at the point where, even if you're not fully clear on your messaging and how you're describing your offer, but you do have a strong offer, you have some solid testimonials, you have happy clients you've worked with that can be interviewed, and you just overall know what you're selling and to who, again, even if you don't know exactly how you're describing it, like the bones of it are there, then I would say it's a great time to work with a copywriter. Or particularly if you're looking to rebrand, if you're looking to scale, if you're just at the point where you're overall, like you already have copy and messaging in place, but it hasn't really grown as your business has grown. I know a lot of us take on kind of like a piecemeal approach at the beginning where you're just trying to get things live in the business, and no shame, I've done it to myself, but that's a good time to look into working with a copywriter.
I love that. And audits can be super powerful, like, especially when, and you're so right. Like, I don't know how many times I changed copy on my program sales page,
Mhm.
but you're right. Like, I remember, hiring a copywriter to write a welcome sequence for me for something that I don't even have anymore. So I think that once you're at a place, I mean, not to say that, you shouldn't get copywriter for something that you think you may or may not have in a year or 5 years from now. But those are good points that you made and very valid, because when you hire a copywriter, they're going to ask you some questions. And some of those
Mhm.
questions are, who's your audience? Who's your ideal client? What are their pain points? Like, you need to have that information in order for them to
Yeah.
be able to help you, accordingly or whatever. So I really love
Mhm.
that. But now that we're talking about do it yourself or hire a copywriter, let's talk about those templates out there, because
Mhm.
there's good, well, to me, I think there's good templates out there. So
Mhm.
let's talk about templates. Like, should we use them? Should we not use them? If we do use them, maybe what should we look out for?
Mhm.
Or what's your take on the
Yeah.
templates, Nicole?
Yeah. So obviously there's some great templates out there. There's also some terrible ones, but there really are a lot of very high quality templates out there for everything from website copy, sales pages, opt-in pages, you name it, you can find it. But I think the problem is that sometimes people think that the template is all that they need. They just use the template as is. They follow all the prompts as is. And again, if you're kind of new, you're just testing a new offer, you just want to get something out there, that's okay. But the problem with templates is that they're very much a one size fits all approach, and they're not factoring in the audience awareness and the differences in audience. So this actually goes back a bit into what we were talking about with the short versus long copy. But for example, I think probably every sales page template I've ever seen will start the page, they have a headline, and then the very next section is going to be pain points. Like, without a doubt, they're always digging into pain points. And in many cases, for many offers, yes, you're absolutely going to want those pain points at the top. But if you, let's say, you have an audience who, I think I referenced this in the short versus long copy kind of debate. If you have an audience who is already super problem aware, they're already aware of all the different solutions, like they're ready to buy a solution, they're just at the point where they want to choose which solution, like they already know, they're already at the point where they know they need a coaching program, for example. They don't want to dig into the pain points. They just want to see what's making you different. What's your philosophy? What is the features and benefits they can expect? Like, they just want to get straight to it. They just want to compare the solutions. Or maybe, for example, if depending on what type of service you offer, your particular audience might have a lot of guilt around the pain points they have. And so if you are just leading and just, poking all those pain points right at the top, you can actually make them feel quite negative when they're on their page. And obviously that's not going to lend itself to a good conversion or a happy, someone who's going to happily click, yeah, let's take this next step and work with you. So I think it's quite important to just make sure you're really getting inside your audience's head and not just blindly following the template. And kind of another issue I see with them sometimes is that people just honestly don't customize them as much as they should. So I can think of, there's one copywriter I like a lot, and she has great email templates. But her welcome campaign, I kid you not, I have seen some variation of it in no less than 10 other like offers I've signed up for. So I'm seeing it everywhere. And again, since I'm a copywriter myself, it's very possible other people aren't noticing it. I hope so. But so I think people just kind of forget, even bundles I've been in, where people like take the swipe copy and don't really customize it so much. And then I end up getting, kind of 5 of the same emails because they're all promoting the same events, but without a lot of customization. So I would say just use these types of swipes, use these templates, but make sure you're factoring in, you know, some strategy behind it, I think. Not doing anything blindly.
And customize it.
Yeah, yes, that's it. Well, yeah, that's kind of a different situation, I guess, when you get into the
But
events
I
and
call
swipes.
it,
But
put some Julieism into it.
yes,
Julie,
exactly. See?
yeah, some Julie vibes.
Mhm.
That's a, put some Julie vibes into it.
I like it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, last thing. Let's talk
Mhm.
about call to action buttons.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
so, you know, back, I'm going to say back in the day, but it's not really back in the day, but call to action buttons. Like I remember I was like, you know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and, you know, this coach that, you know, I had, or this thing that I was at, mastermind retreat thingy, put the call to action button in the corner and then put it here and make sure it's like a bright, bold color and
Red with exclamation points and capitalized letters. Ooh, makes me shudder for anyone who's not
yeah.
watching.
Okay, so let's talk about call, and it's like this is probably going to change in another year or two.
Oh,
But
yeah, I'm sure.
today, let's talk about call to actions today.
Yeah. Well, so this actually fits in a lot into what I was saying about the templates, which is, you know, don't just blindly put the call to action at the top above the folds. When I say above the fold, just the part you're seeing on your page before someone starts scrolling, without making sure you're intentional behind it. Because something you see, like really the kind of common recommendation is always have a call to action above the folds. And again, in many cases, sure, that is the right thing to do. But in some cases, this can get people, like, let's say, you know, you have like a buy now button. You know, it's a several thousand page, oh gosh, I hope not, several thousand word sales page. And at the top, you have a buy now button. And so someone is going to land on the page. They're relatively cold. They haven't read anything else. All they've read is your headline, but they might click that button because people like clicking buttons. And then they're immediately pulled off the page onto a checkout page where they're seeing the price. And then you might be, by putting that button there, you might be getting more clicks overall, but they might be premature clicks. So the person lands on this page and then they get sticker shock because, again, literally all they've seen so far is your headline. They haven't scrolled through the page and seen what's included. They haven't seen if you have payment plans. They haven't seen testimonials or logos or an introduction to you or any of the things that you're going to want them to see. So they're kind of feeling like, oh, this could be for them before, you know, they land on the next page and see the price. And so one thing that can work if you do have a call to action at the top of the page, rather than, you know, having me click that button, and go straight to a checkout page, you're pulling it down. It's like see course details, for example, and you're pulling them down to that. But there's still, you know, around that area where you're including, you know, the features of the course, you have some testimonials, so people are still seeing all of those sections. One other thing I would mention is that often when you put testimonials above, or sorry, not testimonials, when you put call to action above the fold, it's not always clear where it's going to go. Like sometimes it just says something like get started or learn more. And you're like, well, where is this actually going to take me if I click it? So they're not always super clear. But if I think, sorry, I'm jumping a little bit here.
That's okay.
But if you think like even on my homepage, for example, I don't put a call to action above the fold. I mean, in my menu bar, there is a place where people can apply to work with me. So it's still easy to find, but I don't actually want people to click right at the top of my homepage onto like see my services or whatever, because I want them to scroll throughout my homepage. I want them to see the logos I have there. I want them to see the introduction to my process. I want them to see the testimonials I have and the quick introduction to my expertise. So by the time they click off the page, they've already started getting some insight into all those different, you know, authority boosters and begin to trust you, what have you. So that way they're not clicking prematurely. And so by the time they do click off to the page, whether, you know, on my homepage or on a sales page, they're a little bit further along in kind of the customer journey and in trusting you. So kind of like the moral of the story is just because a template recommends you put a call to action in a certain spot, take some time to think of it, make sure it's logical, and make sure you're doing it intentionally. That's like the baseline.
Okay. I love that. That's good advice. And what are your thoughts on the color of the buttons?
I mean, I'm sure there's studies showing which button performs
Yeah.
best. I mean, I'm pretty against just like by nature the angry red, but I'm sure it works in some cases. I mean, I don't know if there's you're more of a design gal than I am, so maybe you can
You
speak
know,
on it.
I
But I'd say
think
contrasting color, right?
I think that if you touch on the important stuff, which is the copy, I think that if you do a really good job at pulling people in with your copy, they don't care what color the button is. If they're going to buy, they're going to buy. Like I think but again, you can test it.
You can test. Yeah, I think the important thing is that it's not like the same color as everything else. Sometimes I see people who just like, it should be a contrasting color so it's standing out.
Yes, of course. And
But
not make it like monochromatic and you can barely see the button. Like,
yeah,
don't do
make
that.
it very easy to read.
Yes.
Definitely. Don't hide that button.
Easy,
That's important.
easy big to click that button.
Mhm.
Okay, that was really good conversation. And you've got a really good freebie. And it's called the 5 quick steps you can take today to give your website copy a connection and conversion boost.
Mhm.
Ooh. So tell us about that and why does everybody need to download it?
Sure. Well, it's free, number one, which is great. But also, I know when you hear a lot of these copywriting tips, it can be like, okay, that sounds great in theory, but how does that actually apply to me? So this will, walk you through some of the things we've talked about today, and I'll actually show like real world examples before and after, which I always think is the best way to actually learn and internalize and figure out how you can apply it to yourself.
I love it. I love it. So I'm going to have the link to that in the show notes. So make sure you grab that because I think, it doesn't matter where we are in our journey. I think we can always use some tips for copy of our website and sales pages and all the things. So thank you so much, Nicole, for being here today, having this conversation with me. I think that this is something that we can never tire of, and it's something that we're always going to need to brush up our skills on copywriter or hire a copywriter to help you, convert better your offers or your website or your coaching packages, whatever that looks like for you, right? So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Julie. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Awesome. And if you're listening to this, I'll talk to you on the next episode.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Build Your Beautiful Business podcast. If you did, please make sure to subscribe, rate, and review the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Julie's included a link in the shows to make it nice and easy for you. And if you want to create a beautiful, profitable business of your own, make sure to go unlock your access to Julie's 6 must-have resources for female entrepreneurs. These resources will help you build and grow your business with simplicity and ease. You can find them at juliecbutler.com/freebie vault. We'll see you in the next episode.